All right, hopefully you can hear me and I'm ready to go. Um, and I am Huey Poplock, and I'm with the Central Florida Computer Society in the Orlando area, although I don't live there. I do the Windows Special Interest Group via the web once a month, and it's open to the public, and we welcome you. So just go to cfcs.org for information. Today we're going to talk about preparing your computer for a presentation, signing into Windows 10, some settings in Windows 10, talk about the Start menu, Microsoft Edge, some other accessories, Task View, help with Windows 10, and then hopefully we'll have some time for some questions and answers. This is a typical desktop. This is my desktop on the computer that I'm using presently. Very cluttered. If you're doing presentations and your desktop looks like that, not a good idea. It can get very confusing for the visitor and the viewer on the computer. So I'm going to show you a few settings that you can do to make it a little easier when you're doing live presentations via the web or just on your computer at a club meeting. If you right mouse click on your desk, you'll see at the top where it says View. If you then click on that, you'll get some ways in which you can change your desktop, but the bottom one says Show Desktop Icons, and you'll see that there's a check mark there. If you click that, the check mark will go away, and it will look like this. It's not cluttered. Not a lot of icons. There are no icons, as a matter of fact, but I still have a very a nice picture, but it's a picture. And again, when you're posting things or showing things on in a presentation, that can get quite confusing to the viewer, and they're seeing some things they're not sure what it's for. So probably what you might want to do then is go into personalize by right mouse clicking anywhere on the screen. And then at the bottom it says personalize. When you click that, it'll open up the settings for personalization. Notice in the center, we're under preview, it says background, and I've got picture. And you can have, by the way, any picture that you would like as your background simply by going to the browse button and bringing up a picture anywhere on your computer and accepting that as your background. However, if you're doing a presentation, what you might want to do is, instead of doing the picture, click on that space, and you'll get picture, solid color, or slideshow, and click on the solid color. When you click on the solid color, you can choose whichever color you wish. You'll notice where where my cursor is, that's the color I am going to choose for my desktop. And so when I do that, it then gives me a nice, clean desktop. Nothing on it, one solid color, and then I can put whatever I want, open up whatever I want on the desktop, and it'll be less confusing for the viewer to your presentation, whether it be online or at a meeting, or if you're recording it. Now, something else that happens when you're doing a presentation, a lot of times there's pop-ups, all kinds of notifications. And it doesn't matter what kind they are, but they are still quite confusing when they start popping up while you're doing a presentation. And if you use PowerPoint for your presentations, you'll be happy to know that Windows 10 includes an option to turn off notifications during your presentations. I've turned it off for this, and I'm going to show you how you do that, but I've done it for this presentation. We'll see if it works, because usually I get pop-ups whenever I'm online for even short meetings, so we'll see what happens. As long as Windows 10 senses that the PowerPoint is running, notifications are supposed to be squelched. We'll see. Okay, to open the settings, there's several ways in which you can do it. The way I usually do it is I just hit the Start button and go to Settings. Your settings menu will look like this, and we're going to look at the System choice in settings where it's display notifications, apps, and power. And in there, you'll see under, there's a list of several items on the left, and one of them is notification and actions. You can turn a lot of those off uh, in general. If you don't like those notifications coming in, you can specifically turn off several. But as we scroll down the page, there is one that says hide notifications while presenting. And what I did was I clicked on that because it was turned off by default. And when I turned it on, it's now supposedly working. We'll find out, huh? Okay, signing into Windows 10. Now, this really doesn't have to do with the presentation, but just it doesn't have to do with my presentation, but if you're presenting to somebody. But what I wanted to do is add in too, since it's at the beginning of our talk of Windows 10, when you're starting Windows 10, signing in. Most of you have created a Microsoft account, and you have to use the password, and hopefully it's a long password to sign in. Well, you know, that gets to be a pain sometimes, but you do want to have some kind of security on there, especially if you're using a Windows 10 mobile device. I happen to have a Surface, and so I like to get into it fairly quickly. And I said, well, there's got to be a way to do this more quickly. I can sign in using 4 numbers on my iPad without a problem. Certainly, I should be able to do something like that in Windows 10 on my Surface. And what I found out was that you can use a PIN. And you can set that PIN up to be whatever you wish and for whatever length you wish. But by default, it's going to say email instead of the word PIN there. There are options if you've set up a PIN, and the one on the left under the options is putting in a number, a PIN, and to the right, it is to put in your password. And I've got 2 of those. And then if you have a touch screen, it can actually look like this. So on my Surface, and even on my desktop, which is a touch screen, I could just touch the screen with the numbers, and it will enter them. As soon as I do that, it signs me right in, and I'm up and running. Now, how do I set that up? Well, you do that, again, going to your settings menu. You want to click on the accounts. When you click on the accounts, on the left, there is one called Sign In Options. Fancy that. As you scroll down, you'll see it'll say PIN. It says create a PIN to use in place of passwords. Having a PIN makes it easier to sign into Windows, apps, and services. And you just click the Add button. Now, I want to warn you before you do this. It's not an on-off switch. I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can remove having a PIN as a sign-in. But if you're traveling with a laptop, you might not want to have the PIN because it's not as secure as using a rather long and involved password. But for home use, it's very handy. So, but you can't just turn it off when you're traveling and then turn it back on. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. If you need some detailed instructions, and it's fairly easy to follow once you click on how to add it, but if you need some instructions on how to do it, go to the How to Geek address that I have at the bottom, or just go to howtogeek.com and do a search for how to add a PIN, and it will bring up this article. And it gives you a screen-by-screen accounting. I didn't want to go into that because we could take most of this session, and I really don't want to do that. However, I did want you to know where you can find that set of detailed instructions. But it shouldn't be so difficult. You should be able to do it very easily. It comes up and says, what PIN do you want? And you just put it in, and it happens. Once you do that, when you go back to your to the setup screen under accounts and sign in options, you'll see now that you can use this pin to sign into Windows apps and services, and you can change that pin at any time. Now notice the other choice there is I forgot my pin. We're going to talk about that in just a second. This is where you start the procedure if you want to remove having a pin. You go to I forgot my pin and you click on it. Here are the steps you're going to need to remove the pin. Remember, I said it's not easy. Yeah, it really should be an off switch, and you just turn that off, and the pin goes away. But they don't have that. So what you have to do is you get to forgot my pin, and when you click on it, it'll then ask, do you want a text or an email where the code was sent? And then once entering the code, you should be able to cancel and then not create another pin, and it goes away. But it's convoluted and a little bit more work than you want to do routinely. So I suggest being selective if you're going to create a pin, because you got to remember to get rid of it if you're going to be traveling. I don't think it's a really good idea to travel with just a small pin. However, you can make that pin fairly long. Also, you have the ability, especially with a touch screen, to use a picture as a password. I think you need the touch screen in order for this to work. And this is what happens when you click to add a picture. And when you do, let's look at the directions here a little bit more. The picture password is a new way to help you protect your touchscreen PC. It is only the touchscreen. And you choose the picture and then some gestures that you will use with it. When you've chosen the picture, you draw directly on the touchscreen to create a combination of circles, straight lines, and taps. So you got to remember what you do on that picture. And then the size, position, and direction of your gestures become part of your picture password. So the steps to create one is to first connect using your Microsoft account to your PC, and we did that. And then I showed you where under accounts, you go into the sign-in options. I showed you that. And then under the picture password, you hit the add button. Once you hit that add button, it's going to ask for your Microsoft account password. And then it's going to ask you to choose the image, and you can also browse and pick out any image that you wish to use for your password. Once you've selected the image, then you draw 3 different gestures on the image, and you repeat them at the exact same spot on the image to save your gesture pattern. So again, it's a little bit more involved than you might want, but it does make it easy with a touch screen to use a picture to sign in. Do remember to clean your screen once in a while, because people can see where your fingers are, where they've been, if you're always going to the same spot on the screen to sign in. Okay, some other settings that I did want to cover with you that I think are important, and the one is under system is power and sleep. A lot of you do updates, upgrades, and backups. Hopefully you do backups. When you back up or when you're doing an install, you want to, number one, make sure you're plugged in so the battery doesn't go dead on you while you're doing it. And the same thing with a backup. And then you also want to make sure that you make some setting changes so your computer doesn't go to sleep or it doesn't shut down while you're in the middle of either updating, upgrading, or backing up. And so I always set those when plugged in to turn off, and for sleep as well to mark it as never. And that way, when it's plugged in, it's not going to shut down while you're doing a long backup or a long update, because you're supposed to be, if it doesn't sense that you've entered anything or moved the mouse, it will time down and shut down. And generally, it's set for either 5 or 15 minutes in order to turn off or to go to sleep. Now, there's something else that you can do on this screen that you might not realize, and that is there are additional power settings which you can set up. And when you click on that, it actually goes to the old control panel, which is still in Windows 10. A lot of you did not realize that, but the power options are just as they were in earlier versions of Windows, and you can create your own or use one that's there, change the plan settings, and so on, just as you did in earlier versions of Windows. So my recommendation would be to go in there and just make sure that you've got the right settings. I have noticed that when one computer that I had, when it updated, it went back to the default power setting, which was balanced, which is the one that was recommended. And so what I had to do is I had to go and actually change the plan settings for balance for it not to shut down, because what was happening was it was starting to go to sleep on me when I was doing a backup. And even though I created my own plan, it once it did an update, it then reverted back to the balanced. So you might want to double check and make sure that the settings are the same before you do a major backup or before you do any of the updates. Now, let's talk about the control panel. If you're familiar with the control panel from versions Windows 7, Windows 8, 8.1, or even earlier, you'll notice that it would come up with the category listing like we've got here, or you could change the view and go to either large icons or small icons. I preferred the small icons. And so you'll notice that they're all there, just as you had in the control panel for those earlier versions. So if you need to go in and make some settings and make some changes, this would be the place to go. You could do that very easily. So you could click on any of those and it will take care of the information that you're looking for. Now, one of the places in the settings that I a lot of times ask people about their computer and they don't know the answer to, this is how you can find out the answer, is under settings, under system, go down to about, and it will tell you a little bit about the operating system and the system that you have. Now, this is my desktop. It is an NUC, which is a small computer from Intel, and it's called a NUC. I call it a NUC because it reminds me of the Three Stooges. And so that's how I called it that. And you'll notice that it's a Windows 10 Pro, and it gives the product ID, and I have 16 gigabytes of RAM in this, and I'm running the 64-bit operating system. And I have full Windows Touch and 10 touch points. So it is a touch screen running Windows 10 on a desktop computer. Now on my laptop, I was able to do the update in November to the fall, what they call the fall update. I haven't been able to do it. It hasn't done it automatically on my desktop, and I'm going to do it manually. I was going to do it this past week, and I said, no, I better not do it, because if it's going to go wrong, I may not have this computer to use for today. And I did want to be using my desktop computer for this presentation. But my laptop, you'll notice the screen is a little bit different, and it has a different edition of Windows 10. It has the 1511 version, which means it was the November 2015 update, which was OS build 586.104. But you'll notice this is the laptop. I have 8 gigabytes of RAM, and it also is a touch screen laptop. So that that information you can get, and there are other programs out there that can do a lot of that, but this is built right into Windows to at least you know what version of Windows you have, you know how much RAM you have. Okay, let's look at the start menu. Everybody wanted Windows 10 to go back to having a start menu, a start button. It disappeared in Windows 8. It kind of sort of came back with Windows 8.1, but it wasn't really there. And they promised in the next version you'd have a start menu, and we do have it in Windows 10. And so I want to talk to you about the way it looks and what you can do. The first thing is that you do have a setting in there that you can tell it that you want, if you loved Windows 8 or 8.1 and you really like having that, having Windows start with just the tiles, you can make that the default. Most people like it to start out with the desktop as we remember it from Windows 7 and earlier, and then have the tiles as part of the start menu. But even when you run Windows 10 in this mode or in the tiles mode, all the programs do start out from the desktop. And so we've gone back to the desktop way in which Windows operates. So this is the way my menu starts out. And you'll notice if you right mouse click along the edge, you get a double arrow. You can drag it by pushing down the left mouse button and let's see, the right mouse button and dragging it. You can drag it to the right and make it larger, or to the right and make it smaller. Make it the other right, the left, and make it smaller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it smaller. And when I do that, it has one column. And that column now is longer, and I have to scroll down to see more of them. So I really like the two column part. I do keep my screen at 19. Let's see, was it 1920 by 1024? I believe it is, or 1920 by 1280. I believe the screen is. So I like it 2 columns wide. I understand the newer version of Windows that came out the fall, the 1511 version of Windows 10. You can have more than 3 in a column of the medium size. You are able to have 4, and you can move them around and have various configurations. But let's kind of look at one particular tile and take a look at what you can do to make the tiles change. When you right mouse click on it, you can unpin it from the start. That's not uninstalling it. All it's doing is unpinning it from the start. And then you can later find it and then pin it back. You can resize it, and that's what we're going to do. We'll take a look at that in just a minute. To the right of the one that we're pointing to, you'll see a picture of an airplane. Well, you'll see in maybe some of the succeeding screen captures that may have different pictures in it, because it's what's called a live tile. That's news, and it shows different pictures from a newscast. So you'll see different pictures there. You can turn off that live tile feature so they're not changing on a regular basis. If you're not always connected to the internet, or you don't want to have that feature turned on, it gets confusing to you. You can tell it you don't want it to be a live tile. You can also click on any of the tiles and pin it to your taskbar. That's the taskbar at the bottom of your screen. So you can make any of these a one-button click without having to open the start menu, by just having it on your taskbar. And then you can uninstall it. Most programs you can uninstall directly from the tile. So at this point, we're going to look at the various sizes. Right now, it's the medium size. Now you can change it to a small, and that's what the small looks like. So there's going to be very little information there. It's just an icon. You're going to have to remember what it is. It doesn't put a word on there. It takes the word away from it. And so you're not sure what it's representing unless you know that that's the money one. You can make it wide, and when you make it wide, you can see it spans 2 tiles. Or you can make it large, which then really is spanning 4 tiles. So there are several settings that you can have for it in your menu, and you can do it with each of the tiles and change it to any size that you want. And then, as I mentioned, you can unpin it from the start. So the one on Xbox, I don't have an Xbox. I don't need the Xbox tile, so I unpin it. When I do, it leaves a blank spot there. Well, I want to move the money one from the position it's in up to next to Groove Music. And so what I do is I click on it with the right mouse button and just drag it, and it's in the position of dragging it between the place that it was and the row above. And as I do that, and then I put it in place, let go of it, and it's now moved up, and now the blank spot is where it used to be. So it's now moved up. So you can move, and you can make your own groupings. You can give them a title for the grouping. You can have as many as you want in a group. You can add, and then that may not be totally true, but you can have several different groups, and you can again resize them and make it so it's easy for you to use. Now, if you want to find an app quickly, one of the ways you want to do that is go to All Apps. And when you go, number one, also below it, it says Ask Me Anything. So if you wanted to find Control Panel, you type in Control Panel and Ask Me Anything, and then it will give you a list of things. But you can also go to All Apps, and when you go to All Apps, you click on it, you'll get a listing of your apps starting with 0 to 9, then A, then B, and then you got to scroll all the way down. If you want something that begins with W, you got to scroll all the way down. No, you don't. What you can do is click on any one of the letters. In this case, I'm clicking on the letter B. When I click on the letter B, I get a menu with 0 to 9, A, B, in other words, whatever ones I have in the apps. And let's say I want to look at the Windows accessories. If I click on the W, it immediately takes me to the W's. So it's a nice, quick way in which to get down to the W items. Now, let's look at the Windows accessories. There are the Windows accessories. You'll notice there was an arrow, which was a drop down. When I click on it, I get a list of the things that are in the Windows accessories. And you'll notice that there's a lot of the ones that were there before Windows 8. Now, I'm not sure if I got it in the next slide. Yes, okay, here it is a little bit larger. Here are the Windows accessories. Character map, I use it because I like it, because it's a way to put a cent sign in or something. You can just click on it, copy it, and drop it in if you don't remember the codes in order to make it happen. Notice there too, there's an Internet Explorer. It didn't go away. Even though Windows 10 comes with Edge, it still has Internet Explorer 11 built in it as well. So if you go to Windows Accessories, go to Internet Explorer, the icon under it, right mouse click and say Add to Start Menu or Add to the Taskbar. Bingo, you also have access to Internet Explorer very easily and very quickly from your desktop. Then you got the Math Input panel. You got Notepad, which I use a lot. Paint is their painting program. Remote Desktop Connection, I don't use theirs. I use TeamViewer, but they do have a Remote Desktop Connection. You can do a steps recorder. Sticky notes, Robin uses sticky notes all the time on her sign-in, where she keeps track of, instead of having real paste-it notes all over her screen, she has them, a program which is part of Windows, has been for several versions of Windows. So if you like sticky notes, try the Windows version of sticky notes. There's a Windows Fax and Scan. There's the Windows Journal, and of course WordPad for to read doc files and RTF files, and then the XPS viewer. So those are all under Windows accessories. They're there for you to use. Okay, as they say, wait, there's more. Okay, we talked about the fact that there's a new browser in Windows 10, and that is Microsoft Edge. Microsoft Edge is supposed to be taking the place of Internet Explorer, but it's not yet ready for prime time. So that's why Internet Explorer still comes in Windows 10. But they want you to use Microsoft Edge, and it's got a lot of good points to it. I'm going to talk about a few things that are good, and just a few things about Microsoft Edge. It's not my browser of choice, but it's getting there. And once I get some add-ons, which I find necessary when I'm using a browser, once they get the ability to add programs to it or have add-ons to uh, Edge and make it happen, it's not my default browser. But let's talk about Microsoft Edge. Here's a web page, and I probably should have done this talking about Microsoft and bring up Google, but I brought up a Google News because it's got a lot of information on it, and it's got a lot of things going on. But I also want to show you some of the things at the top, some of the things you can do with Edge. At the very top, there are several items in the menu, and let's kind of look at them. You can make a web note, and that's by clicking there, and you can go to the hamburger menu, which is the hub for favorites, the reading list, the history, and for downloads. You can go into the reading view, and this reading view, if you haven't used it, go to a web page and then click on the reading view. What it does is it takes all the ads out, it takes all the menus and so on out, and it just gives you the gist of it gives you the article without having all the other stuff. And what I really like this about Edge, and then I realized that Firefox has the same feature in it. They call it something else, and I don't recall what it is, but they do have the same. It's a simplified web page. By clicking on it, you just get the information that you're looking for. So, but take a look at the reading view in Edge when you go to a couple of web pages and take a look at it. You can add any website to favorites or to the reading list by clicking on the star. It immediately just adds it to the favorites or the reading list. And then under the share icon, you can share via email, a reading list app, Facebook, or OneNote. They don't have an Evernote connection, so that's one of the reasons I don't use Edge for most of my browsing. And when you click on the three dots or the ellipse, you get several changes, including that's where you get to print. Print is not an easy, it's not easy to print a page. You do have to click on those three buttons, go down to print and then print. You can also pin a website to start, and there's some other things that you could do from that ellipse or those three dots. Now, something else you can do with web notes now that I mentioned in Microsoft Edge is the fact that you can highlight, you can draw, you can circle, for instance, on Tuesday like I did using a pen, and you can change the colors of those, or you can create a note by clicking on the note button, and it'll open up and you can type something in, and then you can share that, you can save that, you can print that using the web note. Under the reading list, you can fill up your reading list by clicking the favorite or the star to save an article for later. So you can create a reading list, then go back to that reading list to read the articles if you didn't have time to read them at that point. And like I mentioned earlier, where is my Internet Explorer? Go back to Windows Accessories, click on, right mouse click on the Internet Explorer, and then you can pin it to the taskbar, and you can pin it to your start button, and I have it on my start button, so I could unpin it from there if I wanted to as well. Snap, if you aren't using Snap or you aren't familiar with it, I love it. I find it very nice and easy to use. You can snap by using the Windows key and the left arrow or the right arrow, and it will make a half a page immediately of that particular window that you have open. You can open a second window, or you can tell it by in Windows 10. Now you couldn't do this in Windows 8 or any of the earlier ones. If you could use Snap, if you do the Windows key and then the up arrow, it will make it a quarter of a window. You can then open another screen or it's another location on the same, happens to be on the same website, mine. But I'm now going to say, okay, I want to make that on the right, but I want to make it on the bottom right. And then I also want to open up Notepad as a third window, and I want to put it on the left. And so when I put it on the left, there it is. So now I can have two websites open and a Notepad open to jot some notes down as I'm looking at those sites. So using the Snap feature, and there's some, it's not just using the Windows key, there are some keystrokes that you can use. And if you've got a touch screen, you can also do some swiping to get the same results, but I find it easier to describe to people by just using the Windows key in order to do that. And again, I could make that Notepad a quarter screen and then have my desktop available, so if I needed to open something else up, I still could do that, and I've got room to do that. So I could have 4 different quarters on my screen. And also with the latest version of Windows 10, you can adjust the width of where the division is, so you can make it 1/3 and 2/3 of the screen instead of 50-50 across the center of the screen. Now, another feature of Windows 10 that I really use a lot is Task View. And if you aren't using Task View and you don't know what it is, you're missing something. If you are a Mac person or have been a Mac person, you may know Mac's been doing something like this for years with multiple desktops, and that's what you're doing with Task View. You build virtual desktops. So down at the bottom on the taskbar, there is a button called Task View. You click on it, and then jumping into Task View is as simple as hitting the Windows logo key and the tab, or hit the task button. To create a new or virtual desktop, there's some keystrokes to do it, or just go to the bottom right. You'll see it says New Desktop, and click where it says New Desktop, and you get a second desktop. I prefer 4. There's 2 on here now, but I'll do create a third and a fourth. Now, they're always there. Once I set up 4 desktops, every time I start up the computer, I always have 4 desktops, but it defaults, everything opens up in desktop 1. Unless I move it to desktop 2 or 3 or 4 and then start opening things. But it will default to desktop 1. So let's say I have several items open in desktop 1, which would be that, or if I didn't have extra desktops made and then want to, I could do it later. But let's say I've got all of these windows open because I get involved in several projects. And so what I want to do is use each of the desktops for a different project. So what you do is you do the Alt-Tab or click on the Task View button. And what you'll see is the 4 desktops on the bottom and then the programs that are open. Notice they happen to be in desktop 4 because when I was preparing this screen capture, I happened to open them all up in desktop 4. I was in desktop 4 when I started opening them, but normally they would be in desktop 1. Anyway, you can then click and drag each one down into a different desktop so that it would look similar to something like this. So the last one is there, and I move it down to desktop 4. And so here's what desktop 1 looks like, desktop 2, desktop 3, and desktop 4, and I can switch back and forth between them. Let's see, let's go back here. So I can go back and forth between any of them, and it just makes it so much easier. Instead of back when just before I moved where I am now, I had 3 monitors on my desk, and each one would have different information in them. But where I moved, I downsized, and I don't have the real estate, so I only have 1 monitor. So I have to do all of this in 1 monitor. Okay, now if you want to find help for Windows 10, how do you do it? Well, one of the places is at the bottom next to the Start button. Just type in the word help, and what you'll see is at the top it says Get Started. You could type in Get Started, and it will come at the same thing. But there is a Get Started or a help or a manual built into Windows 10. You didn't know that. You can find help by going to Get Started. And when you go to Get Started, this is what it looks like. You'll see on the left there are some menu items, and then in the main part is where the information is. And then you'll see there's a Get to Know Windows 10, Microsoft Edge, Start Menu Tips, and Getting Help. So let's just click on one of them, and here's setting things up. Set up email and calendar. You see that it is a tutorial that allows you to go through, and if we scroll down the whole thing, it would have a whole article on how to set up email and a calendar. So all of that information is on your computer in Windows 10 just by going to it. So there's a built-in manual. Okay, I see that there's several questions, and I covered a lot of material, and I left out a lot of material, but I covered it in the matter of time allotted to me. And I see if you want to read the questions to me, it's probably easier than me going up.
Okay. Yep. Okay, what we can do is, you talked about the virtual desktops. Do you ever use that during live presentations, and how does that work?
Yes, I have, and it depends upon the software you're using. I've used it with Adobe Connect, and when I switch the windows, it works, but the recording didn't pick it up. So I had to play with it a little bit, and I finally got it to work. But I was able to change from one desktop to the other, and people were able to see different ones.
Yeah, have you ever used it in Zoom?
I don't think so.
Okay.
We may try it while we're on here if we have time once we get through some questions here.
Okay. And a gentleman wrote, I don't have his name, I just wrote the note. He said on his Windows 10, he said there is an option to remove the pin.
Oh, okay. Well, that may be in the new one, and I'll have, because I haven't set a pin up on my laptop. That might be in the new, in the fall version, and I will find out this week when I update this computer.
Yeah.
If that's true. Okay.
And the other one, have you ever had problems waking up your computer after it goes to sleep?
Yes. That's why I don't like to use the sleep mode, especially internet connections sometimes don't connect or don't connect properly when you wake up from sleep. I don't like that, and I generally will power off before I'll put it to sleep.
Okay. Judy wants to know, can you have separate picture in each of the desktops?
No.
And I think what she meant is the background.
Yes, she does. You can't. If you change it in one, it'll change on all. That was something I would like to have, so to help differentiate which one I'm in. So you can't do that, and it doesn't. When you shut down, if all the programs close out, and when you start back up, they'll all be in desktop 1, and you'll have to move them around again. It does not remember desktops from one booting to another.
Okay. Bernard said, if you talk nicely to Mr. Poplock, he may make a presentation to a user group when you have a little bit more time.
Yeah, or the CFCS meets the second Sunday of every month. And just prior to their main meeting is the Windows Special Interest Group, in which I run. But I do it virtually because I'm 120 miles from where the meetings are held. And so I do it from home every month. And that meeting is live. There is a link on the CFCS webpage, or if you can't find it, just contact me and I will send you the link and you're welcome to join. We use Adobe Connect. We have a license for 100 people, so we could have up to 100 of you every month. And on also at huey.net/winsig is a list of everything that I've covered since 2008 in the Windows Special Interest Group with links to all of them. So if you have questions about almost any version of Windows, including Windows 10, you might be able to find links to articles at that website as well.
Yep. Jolene wants to know, can you move programs from one virtual desktop to another, or do you have to open each program on a separate desktop?
No, you can move them as you need. You can just click and drag it and move it from one to the other. That's not a problem. Keep them coming.
Okay, well, I'm looking. Well, I got awesome and dragging. I think she wants to know about, you drag the program. How do you move them?
Let's see if I can get out of this. And hopefully you're going to see my desktop. I better, better minimize this so it doesn't go away, and I'll do this. Okay, I don't have a lot open, but you'll see that, okay, there's my desktop. Let me open up something here. Let me just open up, well, let me open up Edge. Do I have Edge here? Yeah, there it is. Okay, I now have Edge open. Now if I Alt-Tab, I can move from one to another, but let me minimize this and go back to task view. And let's say it's right now in desktop 1. If I move it down to desktop 2, it moves it over. And then if I click on desktop 2, you see it. You should be seeing it. So obviously going from one desktop to the other within Zoom allows me to do that. There's nothing in desktop 1, but if I go back here, if I drop this into desktop 1, oh, come on. It's not wanting to go there.
Yeah.
Okay, it's minimized, that's why. I maximize it, it's there, and so it's there. Okay.
You got another question about the snapping again. She wanted to know how you got there.
Okay, the snapping, let's go back to here. The Windows key and the right arrow. Let's see, I've got to highlight the program, Windows key and right mouse click. So the Windows key and the right mouse arrow. And if I left mouse arrow, no, if I, come on. Gotta make sure that's, if I up mouse it, or up mouse it, if I hit the Windows key and hit the up arrow, it then makes it a quarter. If I down, it gets it back. And if I put it over to the other side, it doesn't. I have to actually take it away from there and then do it to the other side.
Well, you can drag it over.
Yeah, you can and drag it. And actually, I'm going to move it with my hand. Let's see if that'll. Let's see. I have to.
Got to grab the top.
Yeah, I gotta. Oops. There, and then there's a way. Yeah, I did that with my finger on the touch screen, so you can just snap it to the right. Okay, yeah. Another question?
Okay. As I said, I don't see any other questions. Well, I could have missed one. There were some comments. So as I said, if you have any questions, we'll leave the chat open for a little bit. I know that most people have been sitting for a long period of time, and we want to thank you, Huey, and all the other guests for being here today and giving us such wonderful presentations.
Okay, and again, if any of them want me to do a presentation on Windows 10, I do one on security, ID theft, and I've got a few other, one on Evernote and Feedly, and I have a few others that I could do. So if your user group needs me to do one remotely, I'd be glad to do it.